Everybody, welcome to this video on audio damage Quanta 2. I'm Jeremy, this is Red Means Recording, and today we're going to get Granular. Quanta 2 is the sequel to Quanta 1, as you might imagine, a Granular plugin from Audio Damage that is available for Windows, OS X, iOS, and Linux. So what are the notable features of Quanta 2 over Quanta 1? Well, we got an overhaul of the user interface, a reworked modulation interface, modulation indicators to show us something's being modulated, root note detection and adjustment for the sample. This is super cool, meaning that if you bring in a sample into the Granular engine, it will try to figure out what the pitch is and pitch it so that it matches the virtual analog oscillators. We now have a second virtual analog oscillator, which is much needed. We have built-in effects, chorus, reverb, and delay, new LFO features, new envelope features, including time and amplitude scaling knobs, which is really, really cool because you can modulate these and get some really, really awesome results. The envelopes also feature multiple breakpoints, which you can loop and sync. So it's like crazy function generators, basically. Really, really cool stuff. We got more MIDI control. We got macro knobs. Some global controls are now exposed in the main window at the top. A new preset manager, and it will load V1 presets. Also, we got this little thing. Wah! Also, we got this little thing right here, which picks up what note you're playing and makes a little like silly graphic depending on what note you're playing, which I think is really cool. Quanta 2 is a MPE-enabled plugin, so it supports MIDI polyphonic expression, which if you have an MPE controller, that's great. I do not, and one thing that Ableton users should take note of, and I'm going to put this right at the top of the video, is down here when Quanta 2 loads up, it will say MPE. It will not work properly unless you turn off MPE if you're not using an MPE controller. Ableton has just decided to whitelist certain MPE plugins and force them into MPE mode, so please note that that is something that you'll need to change down there. So let's go ahead and make an int patch and let's get started. On your desktop, you can drag a sample right into here and it will load it up. And now we can scrub through it. That's that classic granular sound. I'm going to turn up the input level right here for the sample and turn the level of the sample out. Let's explore some of the controls here. We have position and we can randomize that. That means the grains are being created from here sort of randomly from this position. You can already hear that we're getting a wonderful sort of glittery cloud kind of thing. The number of grains are how many of those little friends we got going on. The more, the denser. So think of grains as like a cloud. The more you have going on, the more you're going to hear. You can also change the grain length. So less grain length will get you this sort of stuttery thing, which is actually really, really useful to create interesting glitching effects. The more length that you have and more grains that you have, the more smeary it's going to become. But be careful because it can get very loud. We can change the grain envelope. Right now we have a smooth triangle. If we go to something a bit sharper and turn things down, you can hear we actually get a rhythmic pulsing from this, which is pretty neat. Isn't that cool? This is what the original sound sounded like, by the way. And here's what we got. You can see that it picked C4 down here for the root note. Let's go ahead and double check that. Now, that's really close. But you can always adjust its relationship to the root note as well. This is a complex pitch source, so it's going to have a little bit more trouble sometimes with these really complex pitch sources figuring out what the root note is, but you can always adjust it. That's so cool. These can be really, really fun to map to things like Aftertouch and Mod Wheel. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to go to Aftertouch, hold down the key, so I know how much I want. Same thing with the length. And this is where the Aftertouch Smoothing comes in. So I can choose to have this smooth. Isn't that cool? Let's leave that for right now. Let's talk about the tune. This will tune anything coming into it, which includes the other oscillators. So this is a tune for the sample when the only thing in here is the sample, but it's going to tune the other oscillators if you send them to the granular oscillator as well. Let's turn up the random. Hear that smearing? That's a randomization for the tune. But we can also quantize this. Let's go into quantize. And let's pick a really easy pentatonic sort of thing. Not quite pentatonic, but close enough. And turn it on. There's unquantized, and there's quantized. So really, really fun. Check this out. If I send the virtual analog oscillator in here, we will actually hear these grains quantize on it. So let's pick a nice little sine wave here and turn up. So there's our original sound right there. And now you can hear it's quantizing that. And it's granularizing it. So again, no quantize, quantize. And you can add notes here if you want. So you can create instant little smeary soundscapes just with an oscillator. That's what our oscillator sounds like. Isn't that cool? One thing I really like to do with this stuff is add a sub-oscillator to my glittery top end. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to take this sine wave, just turn the level up right here, and then turn it down to -24. You can hold Control on Windows and get fine adjustments here. There it is. Wonderful. Cool. Let's go over and add some effects to this. Cool. Let's explore the other stuff here. We can randomize the amount of grains. Randomize the length. Let's keep that low for right now. Let's go ahead and modulate the position of this with an envelope. So I'm going to stick FEG4, and I'm going to turn it up. And then I'm going to go over to envelopes, 4. And here's our envelope. You can see that it is now reacting. There's that view that we got in Quanta 2 as opposed to Quanta 1. We can now see modulation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to adjust this so it's an up and down friend like this. And these are our loop points. I'm going to go ahead and do this. When our mode down here is in forward or forward backwards forward, we will loop the current envelope. And that means that, by the way, if I wanted to do that, I could just loop that part right there. There's a lot of uses for this. One of them which is like rhythmic modulation, because if we hit sync, you can now see down the bottom there that it says time. Each one of these now has a time associated with it. So we can actually create timed modulations. Isn't that cool? Now, the envelopes can't do bipolar modulation, but the LFOs can, and I'll get to that in a different patch. You can randomize the output of each grain, which gives us a bit more spreading. And we can increase the width, which is really, really nice. Let's modulate the level of our virtual analog oscillator 1 here with an LFO. I'll right-click on this, go to LFO 1, and we'll go over to our modulation here and take a look at the LFO. We have variable shape, which can be modulated. We have warping. I love the animations in this stuff. It's super cool. Frequency, which can be synced. This only goes to 2/1, however. So if you want to do something slower, you're going to want to use the envelopes because these can go real real far, much farther. You can build a much longer chain of modulation here than you can with the simple synced LFO. But obviously, you know, there's all kinds of movement, skewing, phasing, stuff and all these can be modulated. So that's really, really cool. So let's go back. Let's go ahead and right click on our level and turn up the amount of modulation. And now you can see that we have an indicator that's modulating. Now, if I wanted this to go above and below this point, we need to make our LFO bipolar. By clicking bipolar, it will now go above and below that point. So I'll go ahead and turn this down. There we go. Modulation can be done negatively as well. So if I turn this up, choose the same modulation source, and turn it down, these will offset each other. Let's go ahead and put some delay on this. Sync that delay. Turn up the feedback. Back to envelopes now. This is our first envelope. This is our volume envelope. So you can see when I play a note, it triggers. So here is our attack. If we want to make a pad, we can turn that up, grab a breakpoint, and you can change between linear, logarithmic, and exponential. You can see here that they're using the loop mode as a sustain. So this will go back and forth and forth. If I put this to non-looping, it will just trigger this once. It'll be a single little envelope right there. But sustain is done with a bit right that. Now, if I do this and create a non-zero crossing envelope, I can actually do some very interesting things. Let me show you what I mean. Now, that can be modulated. That's where the scale and level come in. So check this out. If I right-click on scale and I add, let's say, the mod wheel, like this, turn this up, what this will do is change the time scale of the entire envelope. So if I go really fast with this and then turn the mod wheel up, we get that sort of like old school BT stutter edit kind of feel. Isn't that cool? We have two filters. Each one is multi-mode, and you can run them parallel, meaning they are two outputs, or serial. You cannot, at this time, run any of the individual oscillators into one of the filters on its own, which is a little disappointing, but it is what it is. So if I turn this on, we'll get a low-pass filter. I like to boost the resonance to make sure the high is still there. It's a very forgiving filter in terms of its resonance, so you can go a little crazy with it if you need to. One of the filters that I find very, very useful is this notch filter, and not just because of its colorful notchiness, which I really, really like. You can kind of get phasery sweeps with it. But one thing I find really, really useful is treating this like a pinpoint parametric EQ. So if you ever just need to get rid of a particular resonance, you can stick that in there and it will work to clean up your sound, which is really, really useful. Let's make something that's not a pad. It's so easy to make pads in here. So let's pick a sample source that is more bass-oriented. So here's a good complex sound source to begin with. Let's turn up the level, turn up the sample. Now I'm going to use an envelope to do that, to move through this. So I'm going to go into position and I'm going to go plus, use FEG2 and turn it all the way up. Then if I go into FEG2 over here, you'll see that I can choose to do basically a single function generator there, which is really, really nice. Then I can mix this with a sub, a little tiny bit of noise. A little bit of that square wave right there. And a tiny bit of reverb. Turn the color down. You can change the grain direction down here, and sometimes you'll get much more interesting results if you experiment with different directions. So now that grain sample on top is doing some very interesting sort of flittering about while our oscillators hold it down. Let's try putting some oscillator 2 into our granular oscillator. That's cool. That's neat. I like that. Let's try making a lead real quick, just to round things off. Here is a sample from a Juno 106. It has a bit of a filter sweep to it. We're going to work with that. Turn up the level. Turn up the grains. Turn up the length. Turn up some random. This gives us a nice spread, sort of a swarmy feel. I'm going to assign this to the mod wheel. Actually, no, I'm going to assign it to Aftertouch. That's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and sort of supersaw this. And let's go to our LFOs and turn up the rate. Turn the number of voices down to 1. And we will go ahead and high pass that a little bit. Let's get a notch filter in there to give this a bit of a phasery sound and modulate this with FEG3. So let's go into our FEG3 here, and we're going to turn this into basically a looping function generator using the loop function and doing this. And we're going to sync this, and we're going to make ourselves a little pattern. So we're going to go, you can see our breakpoint now has a time associated with it. We'll do 316, 316 up again, and then we'll do an eighth note right there, and then nothing for 16th note. And we'll go up again, and actually let's go like sweep a little bit. We'll do eighth note and then down an eighth note. I love the sound of that notch filter so much. Let's add a little bit of reverb. Very, very cool. So yeah, this thing can do all kinds of different sounds. I would say that it excels, as you might guess, at atmospheres and pads. That's usually my go-to for granular just because of the sheer amount of texture that's involved in granular processing. However, as I've been making presets, I've really tried to make a variety of things: atmospheres, pads, keys, and leads, basses. Granular plugins offer a huge amount of sound design capabilities just because of their nature to really transform sound with grains. So if you're looking for a granular plugin and you get this, try throwing all kinds of stuff at it. It's really, really, really fun and really rewarding. Very fast to get up and running. The UI is snappy as heck. This isn't a review. I'm just like saying stuff that, you know, I think about it. So let's recap. Quanta 2 is a granular plugin from Audio Damage, sequel to Quanta 1. We have 2 virtual analog oscillators with variable wave shape tuning, fine tune and pulse width. We have a noise generator. We have our granular oscillator, which is the star of the show, with lots of really, really cool options that can all be modulated. We have 2 filters, very, very useful, including the notch. We have an effect section with chorus delay and reverb. We have incredibly useful and syncable function generator or envelope things here with the scale and level so that you can really do some amazing modulation with those, with like the mod wheel and stuff like that. We have a robust modulation section with 2 variable shape LFOs with skew and phase. All of this stuff can be modulated. They can be bipolar, sync, retrigger. We have a sample and hold random section where we can actually choose the random source from a different place. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. And you can see that we have smoothing and a rate here that can be synced. Finally, we have settings for Aftertouch Smoothing, pitch bend override. We can do MPE, global tuning, macro knob stuff, and then we can actually write all these settings and save this current thing to its default state. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for Audio Damage for sponsoring this video. See you in the next one. Thank you for watching. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Means Recording, and I hope you have a very granular day.